Hello, this is Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, how many times have you heard the phrase, "We don't support your solutions because we don't want the government involved in our business"? This is the most prominent phrase we hear in opposition to mandatory country of origin labeling or cool for beef, and now in response to our support for Senate Bill 3693 or the 5014 bill that requires packers to purchase at least 50% of their cattle from our most important price discovery market, and that's the fed cattle cash market. Now, presuming this is the real reason for these other groups' opposition to mandatory cool and to the 5014 bill, how can we explain these groups' flip-flop when it comes to the government's new plan to mandate radio frequency identification ear tags, or RFID ear tags, on every American cattle producer that wants to ship adult cattle across state lines? And that's right, the very groups who publicly cry government intrusion every time a meaningful solution is offered to rebalance the disparate market power between independent cattle producers and highly concentrated beef packers are now acting as cheerleaders to help the government force you to use the most expensive animal identification technology in commercial use today. But that's only if you want to transport a trailer load of cull cows or bulls across state lines. Now, RCAF USA is the only national cattle industry trade association that opposes the new mandate proposed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's a mandate that will eliminate your choice as to how to identify your cattle, and instead it will force you to not only tag your cattle with expensive RFID ear tags, but also it forces you to obtain a premises identification number, or PIN. You get this by registering your premises in a government database as a precondition to being able to even obtain the mandatory RFID tags. And that's not all. The RFID required PIN number attaches to your real property and remains there after your property is sold or changes hands. Now, never mind the flip-floppers. This new proposal is the epitome of government overreach and government intrusion. Now, the deadline for commenting on USDA's new proposal was this week, and RCAF USA filed formal comments strongly opposing the agency's RFID mandate. We oppose it on the grounds that USDA is unlawfully attempting to amend substantive federal law that expressly grants American cattle farmers and ranchers the option of using various forms of animal identification, including metal ear tags, to ship their adult cattle across state lines. Now, substantive federal law can be changed in three ways. Congress can amend the law, the USDA can engage in a formal rulemaking process and change its implementing regulations, or a federal court can strike down the law if it is arbitrary and capricious or a violation of the Constitution. But the USDA is doing none of the above. Instead, it's attempting to amend substantive federal law simply by issuing a notice. Congress did not give the USDA any authority to do this. So USDA's simple notice is simply unlawful. In our comments, we point out that when it explained current law, the USDA gave express assurances to cattle producers that they could choose among various identification devices, including metal ear tags, when shipping their cattle interstate. The USDA's simple notice now reneges on this promise. The USDA also gave Native American tribes the same assurance, that their producers can continue using metal ear tags under current law. The USDA's simple notice reneges on that promise as well. We further point out that current law does not require producers to register their premises as a prerequisite to shipping cattle interstate, but the USDA's simple notice attempts to do just that. And then we point out that USDA engaged in inappropriate sensationalism in its effort to gain support for its unlawful RFID mandate. In a recent Beef magazine article, the USDA used the imported Canadian cow that was detected with BSE, or mad cow disease, in 2003 as an example of why RFID was necessary. The USDA was quoted as saying the only way USDA could determine the foreign origin of that cow was through the use of a Polaroid photograph that USDA obtained from the Canadian cow's previous owner. Well, the Centers for Disease Control flatly refutes that sensational story. Instead, the official report discloses that the infected cow was affixed with a Canadian ear tag, presumably a metal ear tag, and that tag led the disease traceback investigators immediately to the cow's health certificate and to her herd of origin in Alberta, Canada. You know, when a federal agency resorts to such deceptive tactics to influence America's cattle farmers and ranchers, It certainly raises serious questions about the agency's integrity. To learn more of what we do to support America's cattle farmers and ranchers and all of rural America, please visit our website at www.r-cafusa.com and join our efforts to restore independence and profitability to the United States cattle producer. With that, have a productive week. Thank you and goodbye.